So, what should Libya look like? What could it look like on the streets of Libya in the coming days, weeks, and months? Joining me now is Kamran Bokhari. He's the Vice President of Middle Eastern and South Asian Affairs with Stratfor. That's a United States-based global intelligence agency. He joins me by Skype from Mississauga, Ontario. Kamran, first of all, we're all looking today at the image of the so-called Lockerbie bomber on his deathbed. He obviously has intelligence that the authorities would want. Do you think anyone should or would intervene in that scenario?
I think this individual, his chapter is pretty much closed. If he's on his deathbed, and the real issue is to make sure that the Gaddafi forces are unable to stage a comeback or prevent the National Transitional Council from leading the country forward. So I don't think there's much interest in this individual, given his own situation and given what is, more at stake in the country.
From what you have seen, Kamran, in the last since the last time we spoke on the 24th, just a few days, but admittedly things look to be changing quickly. Still no sign of Gaddafi. Is that a problem?
It is a problem so long as he's out there. We don't know where he is or how well armed and resourced he is. And at a time when everybody wants the National Transitional Council to move away from being just a rebel group to assuming the role of some sort of authority in the country, Gaddafi's whereabouts, or at least the fact that he's and his forces are still at large, remain a huge threat.
Okay. One thing I want to put on the table that I haven't heard discussed so far is that Libya has fairly large oil reserves. I believe it's the largest proven oil capacity in Africa. And there's been some conversation in some quarters lately about how impossible it is for big oil-producing nations to actually make a transition to democracy. What do you think?
I think they're probably right, and we're getting ahead of ourselves when we talk about things like democracy, because at this point, we're dealing with really, really basic stuff. The militias, will they hold together, or will they start fighting with each other? If it's the latter, then that bodes ill for security and the establishment of a new authority, and could, basically plunge the country further into chaos. So I think democracy is, really further down the road. We're really worried about the basics right now. And with Gaddafi's forces still at large, things don't look too bright at this point.
Mm-hmm. So you're really looking at a scenario where you want to see stability in the country, some form of stability.
Yes, the NTC and the militias that supposedly report to the NTC need to be able to demonstrate that they can actually impose some sort of security in the various areas that are now under their control, especially the capital. For that to happen, they need to be on the same page. The various elements within the rebel landscape. And so far, we really can't tell one way or the other.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that they're going to be looking at, in terms of, any government is going to need money to function. And I know there's billions of dollars, as I understood last count, about $100 billion in the world that is in the process of being unfrozen so that the NTC can actually get on with the business of governing and stabilizing the country. Is that enough to sustain it to the point where the oil experts could be up and running again?
Again, it depends on whether they can establish security. If you look at all the statements that are coming from the Europeans in terms of what will happen to the energy sector in the country now that the country is trying to move beyond Gaddafi, they're all saying that everything boils down to the establishment of security. And yes, the prospect of making a lot of money and through the oil exports and the unfreezing of the assets on the part of the West can be a source of or an incentive for the rebels to move towards that kind of stability. But those same enticements, the ability to make more money and enrich themselves, can also be a source of discord where rival factions start to compete with one another over the goodies.
Where do you think the most likely point is that if Gaddafi and his loyalists are out there somewhere waiting for their moment to make trouble, at what point do you think that trouble might come?
It's very difficult to say because we're dealing with a lot of what we call fog of war. The situation is really opaque. Clearly, if we knew, then Gaddafi wouldn't be much of a threat. The fact that his whereabouts are unknown and his plans are unknown, really, that is what determines and defines the threat level. We really need to see just what we can expect in terms of Gaddafi. So far, it seems like they're hunkered down somewhere in areas that are outside the control of the rebels. And once the rebels try to go in with full force, we could see, a lot of resistance. And prior to that, I think Gaddafi might be planning some offensives of his own, again, dependent upon the resources that are at his disposal at this time.